Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story, some background about me. I'm a freelance graphic designer who spent the last 8 years grinding away, saving every penny I could. I lived in a tiny studio apartment, drove a beat-up Honda, and basically lived off ramen just so I could eventually buy my own place. Last year, I finally had enough saved up to make it happen. I found this beautiful house that had been foreclosed on. It needed some work, but it was in my budget and had the one thing I'd always dreamed of having, an in-ground swimming pool. I know it sounds silly, but growing up poor, having a pool was like the ultimate symbol of making it. The day I got the keys, I just sat by that pool for an hour, still not believing it was actually mine. The house came with an old chain-link fence around the backyard that was maybe 4 feet tall and had seen better days. I immediately called a fencing company to get a proper privacy fence installed, but they were booked solid for 3 weeks. I figured it wouldn't be a big deal. I was new to the neighborhood, and everyone seemed friendly enough. That's where I made my first mistake. The day after I moved in, my new next-door neighbor came over with a casserole. She introduced herself and seemed nice enough at first. She was probably in her mid-40s, perfectly put together, and had that overly cheerful suburban mom vibe. She made small talk about the neighborhood, and then made a comment that should have been a red flag. She mentioned how the previous owners, the family that lost the house to foreclosure, had always been so generous with the pool. She went on about how they treated it like the neighborhood pool and let everyone use it for summer gatherings. She said it was the heart of their community activities. I tried to be polite but clear, telling her that sounded nice, but I was looking forward to having some privacy. She just smiled and said she was sure I'd come around once I got to know everyone better. I should have been more direct, but I was trying to be a good neighbor. The first week went by peacefully. I was settling in, working on some client projects, and slowly making the house feel like home. Then, Tuesday afternoon happened. I was on a video call with one of my biggest clients discussing a major project that could set me up financially for months. We were going over some detailed revisions when suddenly this incredibly loud pop music started blasting from what sounded like my backyard. Then came the shrieking, laughing, and splashing. I had to mute my mic and excuse myself from the call. I walked to my back window and could not believe what I was seeing. There were people in my pool. Not just 1 or 2 people. An entire party. My neighbor, her husband, their 2 kids, and what looked like 3 other families were having a full-blown pool party in my backyard. They had brought inflatable pool toys, a massive cooler, and were using the patio furniture that came with the house. One of them was trying to set up a portable grill on my wooden deck. I watched in shock as kids ran around my yard while adults lounged on floats in my pool, drinking what appeared to be margaritas. I quickly ended my client call, promising to get back to them later, and went outside. My heart was pounding and I was trying to process what I was seeing. I approached the group and tried to stay calm. I asked what was going on and explained that they couldn't be there because it was my private property. My neighbor looked at me like I was being ridiculous. She told me they were just cooling off and reminded me about what she'd said regarding the previous owners. She made it sound like I was being a spoil sport and that there was plenty of room for everyone. Her friends were looking at me like I was the problem, and I could hear them muttering about unfriendly neighbors. I had to stand my ground and explain that I wasn't the previous owners and that I was the current owner, telling them they were trespassing. I asked them to gather their things and leave immediately. They did leave, but not without attitude. Her husband made some passive-aggressive comment about people not knowing how to be neighborly. The kids whined about having to get out of the pool. The whole thing was humiliating and infuriating. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. A few days later, I came home from grocery shopping to find my neighbor's kids in the pool again. Just the kids this time, maybe 8 and 10 years old, swimming around unsupervised. I had to walk them back to their house and explain to my neighbor that they couldn't be in my yard without permission. She acted like I was overreacting, saying the kids were good swimmers and I needed to relax. She made it sound like I was being paranoid about child safety. I tried to explain that it wasn't about their swimming ability. It was about liability and the fact that they were on my property without permission. She just rolled her eyes and said she'd talk to them, but I could tell she thought I was being unreasonable. The situation escalated the following Saturday. I had gone to the hardware store to pick up some supplies for small repairs around the house. When I came back, I couldn't even park in front of my own house because there were so many cars lining the street. The music was so loud I could feel it vibrating through my car windows. As I walked toward my front door, I could see people I'd never met before in my backyard. This wasn't just the neighbor and a few friends. This was a legitimate party with at least 20 people. I stood there for a minute, just trying to process the audacity. These people had planned an entire event in my backyard without even asking. They were treating my property like their personal entertainment venue. Instead of confronting them directly this time, I decided to take a different approach. I went inside, took some photos from my windows for evidence, and called the police non-emergency line. I explained that I had trespassers on my property who refused to leave despite multiple warnings. 2 officers arrived about 20 minutes later. As soon as they got out of their patrol car, my neighbor intercepted them on the front lawn. She immediately started this dramatic performance, complete with tears, telling them that someone was trying to kick her and her family out of their home. She claimed I was some kind of squatter who had just shown up and was harassing them. I watched this unfold from my front porch, amazed at her performance. She was really laying it on thick, talking about how scared her children were and how I had been threatening them. The officers looked confused and turned to me for my side of the story. This was the moment from my title. I stayed completely calm and introduced myself to the officers using my full name. I explained that I had purchased the property recently and that these people were my neighbors who had repeatedly trespassed despite warnings. I told them I was the legal owner of the property. The officers asked for identification, which I provided along with my driver's license showing my current address. Then I pulled out my phone and showed them the digital copies of my closing documents and deed that I keep saved. I had learned to keep everything accessible after dealing with some complicated client contracts. The moment the officers saw the documentation, their entire demeanor changed. They walked over to my neighbor and informed her that she was actually the one trespassing and that if she and her guests didn't vacate the premises immediately, they would be arrested. The look on her face was priceless. All that fake crying stopped instantly, and she tried to argue that there must be some mistake. The officers weren't having it. They made it clear that everyone needed to pack up and leave right away. Watching 20 people pack up their pool party while being supervised by police officers was incredibly satisfying. My neighbor was clearly humiliated in front of all her friends, and I could hear them asking her what was going on as they gathered their things. After everyone left, the officers advised me to consider installing security cameras and maybe getting that fence up sooner rather than later. They said neighbors like this often escalate their behavior when they don't get their way. I knew they were right. I could tell from the look my neighbor gave me as she left that this wasn't over. She's the type of person who doesn't handle being told no very well, and I had just embarrassed her in front of her entire social circle. That night, I called the fencing company and paid their expedite fee to move up my installation. I also contacted a security company and had cameras installed covering every angle of my backyard. I put up signs making it clear that the property was under 24-hour video surveillance, but I knew that might not be enough. My neighbor struck me as vindictive, and I had a feeling she was going to try something else. That's when I came up with my plan to teach her a lesson she'd never forget. I went to a restaurant supply store and bought several bottles of professional-grade green food coloring, the kind they use to dye rivers for celebrations. It's completely non-toxic, but creates an incredibly intense color. Late that night, knowing the weather forecast called for a hot, sunny day, I added the dye to my pool's circulation system. By morning, my crystal-clear pool water looked like a disgusting swamp. It was this opaque, sickly green color that looked absolutely revolting. I also installed a motion-activated sprinkler system aimed directly at the gate area between our yards. The next afternoon, I got a motion alert from my new security cameras. I pulled up the footage and watched the most satisfying scene unfold. My neighbor and 2 of her friends, all dressed in swimsuits and carrying towels, snuck through the gate area. The moment they stepped onto my property, the motion-activated sprinkler hit them with a blast of cold water. They were completely soaked and shocked, but they kept going toward the pool, probably figuring they were already wet anyway. The moment they saw the swampy green water, they stopped dead in their tracks. I watched them stare at the pool in complete disgust and confusion. My neighbor started having what can only be described as a full-blown tantrum. She was gesturing wildly and clearly furious that her plan had backfired. They retreated quickly, dripping wet and defeated. The fencing company arrived the very next day and installed a beautiful 8-foot-tall solid wood privacy fence around my entire backyard. No more access from the neighbor's yard, no more visibility into my space. I had the pool professionally cleaned a few days later, and the water was back to sparkling blue. The whole incident had cost me some money, but it was worth every penny to see the look on my neighbor's face when her entitled behavior finally caught up with her. The aftermath was interesting. My neighbor tried to start some kind of smear campaign telling other neighbors that I was difficult and antisocial, but I had anticipated this and shared a short, edited video with a few key neighbors showing the trespassing incidents and police involvement. Most people were actually sympathetic to my situation. Apparently, my neighbor had a reputation for being pushy and entitled, and several people mentioned they'd had their own issues with her boundary problems. The neighborhood generally sided with me, which only made her more isolated. A few weeks later, I was finally able to enjoy my pool in peace. I was floating on a raft on a beautiful sunny afternoon, reading a book and just enjoying the quiet. It occurred to me that this was exactly what I had worked so hard for, a peaceful sanctuary where I could relax without worrying about entitled neighbors treating my property like their personal playground. I never wanted a war with my neighbor, but some people only understand firm boundaries. The whole experience taught me that being nice and trying to avoid conflict doesn't work with everyone. Sometimes you have to be willing to stand up for yourself and your property rights, even if it makes you temporarily unpopular. The funny thing is, my property value has actually gone up since the fence was installed. The privacy and security improvements made it more attractive, and potential buyers love having a truly private backyard space. My neighbor still lives next door, but we don't speak. She avoids making eye contact when we see each other, and I'm perfectly fine with that arrangement. I learned that some battles are worth fighting, especially when it comes to protecting your peace of mind in your own home. Looking back, I'm proud of how I handled the situation. I could have escalated things much further, but I found a way to solve the problem definitively without causing permanent damage or getting into legal trouble. The green pool water was harmless but effective, and the security footage of her reaction still makes me smile. The best part is that I finally have what I worked so hard for, a beautiful private space where I can relax and enjoy the fruits of my labor. No more uninvited pool parties, no more entitled neighbors, just peace and quiet in my own backyard. For anyone dealing with similar neighbor issues, my advice is to document everything, know your rights, and don't be afraid to involve authorities when people won't respect your property. Sometimes being the difficult neighbor is exactly what the situation requires. The pool is still here, the fence is still standing, and I'm still enjoying every minute of the privacy I fought for. Some lessons are worth teaching, even if they require a little creativity and a lot of green food coloring. Update 6 months later. Holy cow, I didn't expect this post to blow up like it did. Thanks for all the support and the awards. A lot of people have been asking for an update, so here's what's happened since I originally posted this story. First, the good news. My neighbor situation has been completely resolved. After the green pool incident and the fence installation, things went quiet for about 2 months. I thought maybe she had finally learned her lesson and we could coexist peacefully as distant neighbors. I was wrong, but not in the way I expected. About 3 months after the pool incident, I was working in my home office when I heard a lot of commotion from next door. There were multiple cars in their driveway, people going in and out with boxes, and what sounded like a pretty heated argument. I didn't think much of it at first, not my business, right? But then I noticed a for sale sign go up in their front yard. I'll admit, I was curious about whether my neighbor drama had anything to do with it, but I figured I'd probably never know the real story. A few days later, I was getting my mail when one of the other neighbors approached me. Turns out, the whole pool situation was just the tip of the iceberg with my former neighbor. After I shared that security footage with a few people, it opened the floodgates for other neighbors to start talking about their own experiences with her. Apparently, she had been pulling similar entitled behavior all over the neighborhood for years. She had tried to claim parts of other people's yards for her kids to play in. She had been stealing packages from porches and claiming they were delivered to the wrong address. She had even been going into people's unlocked garages and borrowing tools without asking. The most shocking thing I learned was that she had been charging other neighbors for access to my pool during the time when the previous owners lived there. She was literally running a side business using someone else's property and pocketing the money. When people found out about this after my situation, several neighbors threatened to sue her for fraud. The final straw came when someone caught her on security cameras trying to break into a neighbor's shed to steal their expensive lawn equipment. Multiple people filed police reports, and she was facing several criminal charges. Rather than deal with the legal consequences and social ostracism, she and her family packed up and moved out of state. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that they moved in with her mother-in-law in another state, and her husband had to find a new job. The house sold pretty quickly to a lovely young couple with a baby. They introduced themselves properly, brought over some homemade cookies, and asked politely about the neighborhood. When they mentioned they had heard there was some drama with the previous owners, I gave them a brief, diplomatic version of events. They were horrified and assured me they had no interest in anyone else's pool. They were actually planning to install their own hot tub in their backyard. They've been model neighbors ever since. But here's the really satisfying part. Remember how my former neighbor tried to tell everyone I was antisocial and difficult? Well, once she was gone and people started sharing their own stories about her behavior, the neighborhood opinion did a complete 180. I went from being the difficult new guy to being the person who finally stood up to the neighborhood bully. Several neighbors have thanked me for handling the situation the way I did, saying they wish they had been brave enough to confront her behavior themselves. One neighbor even told me that property values in our area have actually gone up since she left, because potential buyers were put off by the drama and complaints associated with her address. Apparently, she had been leaving negative reviews and complaints about the neighborhood online, which was affecting everyone's home values. The security cameras I installed have been worth every penny. Not for catching more entitled neighbors, thankfully that hasn't been an issue, but I've actually helped solve a few minor neighborhood problems. I caught someone dumping trash in the storm drain and was able to provide footage to the city. I also caught a package thief in action, and the footage helped police catch them. My pool has become something of a neighborhood legend, not in the way my former neighbor intended, but as a symbol of standing up for your property rights. A couple of neighbors have mentioned the Great Pool War when introducing me to new people, always with a laugh and obvious admiration for how I handled things. I've actually become much more social in the neighborhood since all this happened. Several neighbors have invited me to legitimate neighborhood gatherings. You know, the kind where they actually ask permission and bring their own food and drinks. I've hosted a couple of small get-togethers myself, properly planned and with invited guests only. The pool itself is in better shape than ever. I've invested in some upgrades, better filtration, heating system, and some nice landscaping around the deck area. It's become exactly the peaceful retreat I dreamed of when I bought the house. I still laugh when I think about that security footage of my former neighbor's face when she saw the green water. I actually save that clip and show it to friends sometimes when they ask about the story. It never gets old. The fence has been amazing too. I ended up extending it around the entire property perimeter, not just the backyard. It's given me complete privacy and security, and I love that I can use my outdoor space without worrying about unwanted visitors or prying eyes. One funny thing that's happened since my original post. I've had several people reach out asking for advice on dealing with entitled neighbors. Apparently, this kind of pool trespassing is more common than I thought. I always tell them the same thing: document everything, know your rights, and don't be afraid to involve authorities when people won't respect boundaries. I've also had a few people ask about the green food coloring trick. For the record, I only recommend this if you're absolutely sure the trespassers will see it and leave without actually going in the water. It's harmless, but you don't want anyone actually swimming in it. The psychological effect of seeing gross-looking water is usually enough to deter people. My business has actually benefited from all this too. Several neighbors have hired me for graphic design work after getting to know me better, and word-of-mouth referrals from the neighborhood have brought in some great clients. Turns out being known as someone who handles difficult situations calmly and effectively is good for business. The best part of this whole experience is that I learned I'm stronger than I thought. When I first moved in, I was so worried about fitting in and being liked that I almost let someone walk all over me. Standing up for myself was scary at first, but it was absolutely the right thing to do. I still live in the same house, still love my pool, and still enjoy peaceful afternoons floating around reading a book. The difference is that now I truly own my space in every sense of the word. No one questions my right to privacy and quiet enjoyment of my property. For anyone currently dealing with entitled neighbors or property boundary issues, my advice remains the same. Be polite but firm, document everything, know your legal rights, and don't be afraid to escalate when someone refuses to respect reasonable boundaries. Most people will back down when they realize you're serious about protecting your property. Sometimes being the bad guy who enforces rules is exactly what a situation needs. I learned that being liked isn't as important as being respected, and respect comes from standing up for yourself when it matters. The green pool water has become something of a neighborhood legend, and honestly, I'm proud of that. It was creative, harmless, and effectively solved the problem without anyone getting hurt or arrested. Sometimes the best solutions are the ones that make people laugh while teaching an important lesson. Thanks again for all the support on the original post. It's nice to know that other people understand the frustration of dealing with entitled neighbors and appreciate when someone finds a clever way to handle the situation. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a pool to enjoy in complete, private, peaceful silence. The next one is a pro-revenge story. I was building an online training module at work that is intended to teach existing users how to work a new process. It has interactive elements, quizzes, segments to work through a few sample scenarios, etc. Now we'd recently got a new associate director who, from what I can tell, advanced through the company by throwing other people under the bus. She gets promoted not for her own merits, but because at the end of the day, she has less mud sticking to her than other applicants. It's uncanny to the point that there simply had to be more to it than stupid office politics. I'll get to that in a bit. So after I have the first draft of the module done, it gets sent out for the usual round of testing, and there are, of course, a couple things that need to be corrected. I build the module off the notes the subject matter experts leave me, and a few things inevitably get lost in translation. But this new associate director just rips it to shreds, complaining that it's completely incomprehensible, needs to go into much greater detail, asking questions about nearly every individual mouse click in the sample scenarios, and overall stating that it's impossible to follow. The thing is, this module is intended for our finance department, for people who have a background in finance, and have already been trained on how to use our internal software. She is a training services associate director with a teaching background. The module isn't supposed to make sense to a former middle school social studies teacher. It's supposed to make sense to people with finance degrees. I push back and try explaining this to her in a million different ways, but she's having none of it. So I have to go back to the subject matter experts with her approximately 20 pages worth of criticism. And at first they think I'm joking. I had to forward her email before they finally believed me. So for the next 2 weeks we're going over every nuance, including readdressing everything that was covered during their 3-week classroom training. How to set up their network drives, how to set up Outlook, including things as nuanced as, if you don't know how to set up your email signature, click here. I mean, really basic stuff that has nothing to do with what the module was originally supposed to teach. But I now had to include it all because our new associate director couldn't find the on switch if you stapled her finger to it. This wastes my time, the subject matter expert's time, and time spent re-recording all the voice work. If you've done voice work in the past, you know you never get it in one take. After it's all done, I send it back out for review and approval, and the associate director simply doesn't respond. A week passes. The finance director takes an interest in why this module is almost a month overdue. I go to forward the associate director's email again, except now I can't find it. Odd, seeing as how I have a hoarding problem when it comes to email. I check with one of the subject matter experts I was working with. He can't find it either. Turns out none of us can find it. It's gone. So I check with a friend of mine in IT who, after a little detective work, discovers that a week ago someone did a compliance delete on the Exchange server. This basically is a seek and destroy for messages meeting certain criteria, in this case a specific phrase she used in her email. I start digging through Outlook, trying to find particular emails related to this that might be used to defend my actions, and they're all gone. Inbox, sent items, deleted items, every last one of them. Any email containing that particular phrase anywhere in it. This kind of thing is normally used by admins to mass delete spam or phishing emails from all users at once. Except in this case, someone apparently deleted emails that showed evidence of her awful decisions. My friend in IT can smell a juicy story a mile away and was very interested in seeing where this went. She recovered the deleted emails and I promptly saved them to a flash drive. For the next few days, every time I had any email with this associate director's name on it, even unrelated stuff, you never know how something might fit together, I saved a copy to the flash drive. I informed the subject matter experts to do the same, and we started building our offline evidence locker. I didn't want to blow the lid on it just yet. I wanted to see if my suspicions were correct. Maybe a lifetime of watching spy movies and cop dramas had corrupted my thinking. Maybe there was another explanation. Who knows, it could happen. I'm not God, I don't know everything. I'll play defense. So, after several weeks in total trying to appease this associate director's unquenchable thirst for irrelevant details, and then getting ignored for a week, she finally publishes it and sends it to the finance director to approve so it can go live. Woo! Except the module, which was supposed to be a 30-minute online course, now contained 3 hours of content and went down several irrelevant rabbit holes that had been deemed critical supporting information. As an analogy, imagine designing a training module to teach a nurse how to enter some new CPT codes and being told you have to teach him how to read too because he might not know what words are. That's how much BS was rammed into this thing. And the finance director, of course, hated it and was surprised that such a rambling mess of a module would come from me of all people. So he calls a meeting with me and the associate director on Tuesday to get some answers, and sure enough, she immediately tried to distance herself from it. Tried to paint it as she made a couple suggestions, and I clearly went way overboard. How I must have sent her a different version that she approved and switched them afterwards. That's not even possible. It would get thrown back into a draft status. She kept trying to talk over me as I voiced my defense, and to his credit, the finance director finally just muted her so I could speak. And boy, did I. I explained everything. I shared my screen, popped in my flash drive, and opened my copies of the emails that had supposedly been deleted. Every email exchange where she complained about the material, I pushed back, and she flat out ordered me to build the module in the way I did. She abruptly left the meeting and went offline. The finance director asked if I could send him a copy of all relevant files, and as I did so, I told him they might not be there later, and then explained what I had learned about someone in IT using the compliance delete. He assures me he'll look into it, and the crap immediately hit the fan. The associate director never logged back on. There was a massive internal audit where people from her previous departments were asked to provide statements. Leadership tried to keep it hush-hush, but you just can't keep something that big under wraps. I don't know the specific what's and hows, but the associate director and one of the IT managers had both left the company to pursue the next stage of their careers, and we sincerely wish them the best. I don't really do the social media thing, but over the next few days, as the rumor mill did what rumor mills do, I heard their crap absolutely blew up, and it came out that the associate director and that IT manager were having an affair. Now, this all went down about a month ago, but as I wrote this post, I thought to check online court records. Both are now facing divorces filed by their respective spouses, so yeah, there's a void in my direct leadership, in IT's leadership, and the entire IT department is getting a shakedown by information security to determine if there were any other leaks. I spent some time reflecting on why this whole series of events happened, and my best guess is she wanted to make a grand entrance by spearheading this masterwork training module that covered every possible scenario and contained any and all information anyone could possibly want. Then, as she started to realize how wasteful, rambling, and unnecessary it was, she realized that her grand entrance would be a grand faceplant. So she tried to erase the evidence and pin all the nonsense on me to save face, but inadvertently set in motion the events that would expose her little arrangement with the IT manager. Taking it up the ass in order to cover her ass, I guess. The next one is an entitled people story. I ran the mail department in a good-sized commercial printing company. Most of my day was filled with taking customer mailing lists and processing them so that they get discounts at the post office, but occasionally I produced consecutively numbered items, red raffle tickets. Now, raffle tickets are small, maybe 1 by 4 inches, too small to run to the machine by themselves. We decided to run them 4 across and 2 high, so 8 raffle tickets per sheet. I created a spreadsheet in Excel that had 8 columns, 1 for each raffle ticket position. The raffle tickets in this particular case were printed on a special type of paper that has a holographic background. Very expensive. The process of setting up the inkjet machine to print the 8 numbers in 2 spots on each raffle ticket is to find the appropriate XY position for the first ticket number to be placed on the customer portion, then copy that number to replaced on the part of the ticket that is ripped off and given to the administrators of the raffle. Now I have coordinates that I can extrapolate to the remaining 7 positions. Having copied and pasted the original 2 text boxes using extrapolated XY coordinates, they were all showing the exact same raffle number, the first row column in my spreadsheet. While I was going through the process of changing position 2 to reflect the data in the second column, position 3 to reflect the data in the third column, etc., my always-in-a-hurry manager showed up and, right in front of my entire department, yelled, "Why is this machine not running yet?" I was currently halfway through updating the 5th out of 8 tickets. I told him that it wasn't set up yet. I still had some work to do to get it ready. He looked at the screen and could see that there was data for all 8 tickets. All 16 positions had a text box associated. Never mind if the text box contained the correct data or not, they all had data associated. Happy to tell you, I pushed back hard. I didn't give him specifics, just that the setup was not complete and cannot be run as is. He asked, "I crap you not. What's it going to take to get this machine running right now?" "Easy. I'll simply comply." I handed him the last piece that came out of the machine. Mind you, positions 6, 7, and 8 all contained data for position 1, and position 5 was only half right, and said, "If you want to put your signature on this piece, we can run it right now. But I'm not signing off on it until I verify the accuracy of all 16 positions." The next day was hell. More special paper had to be purchased, delivered FedEx overnight, first AM delivery, rush job to print and cut and deliver to my department, rush to imprint correctly positions 5 through 8, cut to final size, box, and deliver to the customer. Job was late. We lost any profit we were looking forward to through overnight delivery, reprint, etc., etc., etc. I just smiled and did my job, never said a word. But the look on his face when he told me I had to redo half the job was priceless. Anyway,